Hello everyone, I'm Danielle from Pangolin Photo Safaris, and in this video I will explain the role that the background plays in your wildlife image and how it can make or break your photograph. I will list 5 key things to watch out for when composing your photograph, and then I'll walk you through the techniques that I use to turn an average photo opportunity into a much better shot. So, let's get going. The background is such an important part of your image, and often we get so excited about the subject that we completely forget about the background. However, paying attention to the background before you take the photo will save you a great deal of time trying to fix it afterwards. One of the golden rules of photography is to simplify, drawing attention to your main subject, and the background is just as important as the subject when it comes to simplifying the image and adding meaning to it. This is not to say that you always have to make the background unnoticeable. If it adds to the story, then by all means use it. For example, using a wider angle to portray the animal in its environment works really well to tell the story. However, if the background doesn't add to the story and it distracts from your main subject or subjects, then you'll have to avoid drawing attention to it. In other genres of photography, you might be able to control your background directly. You add a backdrop or you ask your model to move around. In wildlife photography, however, this is not the case, and you often have to work with what you have to control the outcome and to minimize distraction. Sure, you'll be able to replace a sky or remove objects afterwards using software these days, but I prefer to get it right in camera without having to manipulate the image in post-production. Now, what should you be paying attention to when choosing your background? Firstly, detail in your background. Separation between subject and background is extremely important. When your subject is not separated from its background, your eyes don't know where to look and they jump between the clutter and your subject. It can even be that the subject's natural environment distracts from it. Grass or rocks or reeds, anything that draws your eye away from the subject and doesn't add to the story loses the impact of the animal or the bird in its environment. We often refer to this as a busy background, and you definitely should aim to separate your background from your subject in this case. I'll tell you how to do this in just a little while. Secondly, objects in the background. Look out for distracting objects in the background. These can either be man-made or natural, and even if they are blurred, they can still be distracting. Other vehicles or boats, wires, poles, etc., it's all a definite distraction. Even a tree or a branch growing out of your subject's head or cutting through it is no good. It's important to note that other animals or birds might also count as distractions. For example, when you're photographing a big herd of elephants here in Africa, they often overlap, and the elephant that you're focusing on might just get lost in between all the others. Background lighting. Background lighting has a profound effect on the image as a whole. One's eye will always be drawn to the brightest part of an image. Patches of light or dappled light, therefore, may be very distracting in the background. Also, if your background as a whole is much lighter than your subject, this will also draw attention away from your subject. There is an effective solution to this one, so stay tuned for that. It's not only the lighter areas that may pose a problem. Another potential problem is when darker parts of your subject disappear into the dark background. For example, a pied kingfisher on a dark background with its black beak. The beak might just blend straight into the shadows. Remember what I mentioned previously, separation is key. Then background colors. Not only do objects distract from the subject, but colors may have the same effect if not chosen well. Solid color backgrounds have the least distraction, or at least a very gentle transition in color will also work. Using complementary colors that fit your subject works well. Note that if your background color is the same color as your subject, which is often the case here in Africa in wintertime with the big cats, they are pretty much grass color and they blend into the background, and you'll have to make a plan to separate subject from background if that's the case. Personally, I like the golden tones with the big cats, but as I mentioned, you'll need to be careful not to lose it to the background by using the techniques that I'm about to mention. Lastly, the horizon. This is one that I find often goes unnoticed. Make sure that the horizon is either below or above your subject. The horizon cutting through your subject or your subject's head will be very distracting, and also a horizon that's not completely straight has the same effect. A crooked one is an easy fix in post-production if you didn't crop too tight when composing your image. Please remember to subscribe to our channel by clicking the subscribe button and the bell icon to get notified about new videos like this that you can watch. Now that we know what to look out for when it comes to backgrounds, I'll give you a few techniques or workarounds that you can apply when you're out in the field to improve your photographs. Number 1, blur your background. This must be one of the best ways to make your subject stand out and make the background less distracting. How do I get that nice blurry background is a question I often get asked. I've made an in-depth video on this topic, which you can watch over here, but I will summarize. To get a great bokeh or blurred background, you should try the following. Firstly, lower your f-stop. In other words, increase your aperture. For example, use f5.6 instead of f9. The lower the f-stop, the better the blur. Then, get closer to your subject. This decreases the depth of field if you decrease the distance between you and the subject. This is not always possible, but it may be an option where you're on a vehicle, for example, or where you're on one of our photo boats here in Chobe. Increase the distance between your subject and its background. How do you do this when you're working with animals that you cannot ask to move around? You change your angle. And by angle, I'm referring to either your vertical or your horizontal angle. You might find that just by shifting a little bit to the left or the right, your background is further away. For example, shooting a longer riverbank versus into the bank makes all the difference to the shot. Also, when you shoot from a low angle at a subject that's on the ground, you immediately aim along the ground instead of into the ground, thereby increasing the distance between your subject and its background. And then the last way to increase the blur in the background is to increase your zoom or your focal length. If you have a zoom lens, just zoom in, or choose another lens with a longer focal length if you're shooting with a fixed lens. A longer focal length results in a shallower depth of field. And those are the ways that you can blur your background best. Number 2 on our list of solutions. Change your composition. If the background distracts, one option is to simply remove it. You can do this by zooming in more to exclude unnecessary distractions or objects. Not only do you remove distractions, but you also get a better bokeh at a longer focal length, as I've just mentioned. Another really easy fix to get rid of distractions in the background is to use a vertical or a portrait composition. This immediately draws attention to your subject and away from the background. This works well for subjects that are taller than they are wide, such as an elephant or a stork, for example. As I mentioned before, your background might add to the story. If it does, by all means, leave your angle fairly wide or zoomed out and choose the composition that best tells the story. Number 3, change your angle. It's that simple. This can make all the difference to the background. By doing so, you might be able to place your subject on a background that has a more pleasing color or tone. I often encourage guests to wait for the right background as we drift into a sighting from the boat. For example, instead of placing the bird in front of a dappled light background, wait for the dark uniform background and then shoot. Keep in mind not to sacrifice the light when you do decide to change your angle. Good light is always still the top priority. Number 4, use your subject to block out distractions. If you can't get rid of the distraction in any other way, then just hide it. I often use the animal or bird that I'm photographing to hide an object behind it. Sneaky, but it really works. Number 5, adjust your horizon. Yes, you can be in control of your horizon. By going low, you can effectively lower your horizon line. Alternatively, if the line is cutting through the subject and you want to raise the horizon, use a higher angle, or stand up. In the majority of cases, you want your horizon to be straight. This is easy to do in Lightroom, where you have a spirit level tool to help you. If I know that I'm going to end up with a skewed horizon, then I tend to compose a little bit wider to compensate for the change in composition that occurs when I'm correcting the horizon afterwards in Lightroom. Then get creative. If you have an overly bright background and your subject is dark, turn it into a high key image by overexposing it. If you find your background is darker than your subject, but has a few distracting patches of light, see if you can underexpose and turn it into a low key image. If your background looks bland and boring and it's flat to you when you're shooting with light, then try changing your position completely and shoot into the sun, creating a rimlet effect with light only on your subject. These are creative techniques that require the right conditions and setting. Check out Sabina's video about creative captures for more detail on the subject. That's it, folks. Next time that you're out photographing, pay attention to the background as much as you do to your subjects, and I can guarantee that your images will improve greatly. Thanks so much for watching. If you have any questions, you're welcome to leave them in the comments below, and we'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.